Shanghai GDG is a very interesting developer community.
I'm glad somebody has asked this question.
This is where the magic happens.
This is primarily a question and answer show. So if any of you out there would like to ask questions.
Welcome, everybody. This is, I think, our fourth or fifth in the installment of the Chrome Apps Office Hours. This week we have a really cool event with some special guests who are joining us. This is the AngularJS team, who was one of the first teams here at Google to build a Chrome app using, obviously, the AngularJS framework. And they've learned a lot over the last couple of months on how to build these things, some of the issues they've run into, as well as how to get around those, and really how to build a really cool Chrome app. So I'd like to introduce Brad Green and Vojta. I forgot your last name. I apologize.
That's okay. Vojta, I think that's enough.
All right. Brad, Vojta, why don't you guys introduce yourselves, and we can talk about TextDrive, this app that you guys...
Great. So yeah, I'm Brad Green. I manage the AngularJS project here at Google, and Vojta is one of the engineers on the project. And we built this app, TextDrive. It's a simple text editor, and it allows you to edit text, which is actually cooler than you think on Chromebooks. Because if you ever want to edit your CRX file without having to go rebuild the bundle, this is a really cool thing to do. Yes. But I think it's a really good example of pulling some pieces together, some of these V2 APIs, and we're showing you how you can take really good advantage of them with Angular. So without talking too much more, Vojta, why don't you take us through the app itself?
Sure. So, as we said, it's just text editor, so you can open files, you can create new files.
Now, I just want to interject here for one sec. You can open files anywhere on your file system, right? This is not just a matter of, hey, you're limited to the normal file system.
No, this is my file system. So,
and just to mention, we're using a MacBook here, but this works on my Chromebook as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I can create new files. I think really cool feature is the searching. So first thing, you can just search, like I can search for ng-click or something. But more than that, if you start searching with / it does this sort of like grep-like filtering. So I can say ng controller, for instance, and you can see that it filters just the lines that matches this regular expression, and I can go edit the text or
so it collapses all the code.
Yeah, it just collapsed it, so I can unfold it back. What else?
And it's not just text, but you've also got some things in there so that editing code becomes that much easier as well.
Yes, I think the main purpose of this thing is for editing any sort of source code.
Okay.
So just a little bit more of how we put this together. So we're using the ACE editor component.
Which is awesome.
It is fantastic. But that doesn't make a full app. So as the wiring bit, we're using Angular to pull the whole thing together into an app. And then we're using these V2 APIs to be able to access all the pieces we need to make it a real application.
Maybe the last thing I could show is there are settings as well. So, you can change the theme. I don't know.
Fantastic. If I want to code in the dark.
Yeah, all these settings are synchronized through Chrome Sync storage.
So if I'm logged into Chrome on one machine, and then go to a different machine and start editing files, I get the same settings.
Hopefully you will get the same settings.
Very cool. So that was something we talked about last week with the Chrome storage APIs, being able to sync those across multiple machines.
Yeah, good. So it's kind of a basic text editor, but let's take you. I think the interesting part is how this editor works and how we built it and some of the lessons.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot of stuff even about Angular and about.
Yeah,
we're developing Angular, but sometimes it's good to develop something with Angular so that you can see. I think we learned a lot of lessons as well.
So just for the folks who haven't used Angular before, let me just give a brief overview. Angular is a framework for building web apps. And it really helps you build MVC, Model View Controller style web apps. And it does this through a couple mechanisms. And you can check this out at AngularJS.org. We've got a ton of code examples. We support it through something called data binding, where we automatically synchronize elements in your UI and the state of them into your properties in your model, into your JavaScript objects. We also have something called directives, which allow you to extend HTML syntax so that instead of having a whole bunch of divs and spans, if you want to build tabs, you can just say tab angle bracket. Or you can, if you're not in an HTML5 browser, you can still say color picker angle bracket. You can make that work in any browser on the web. And we'll see some of these features and how they come together to build a really nice MVC style app. So Vojta, can you take us through some of this?
Sure.
Matter of fact, let's look at the app itself. So in MVC, the controllers usually map to certain parts of the UI. And
that's exactly what it does in Angular.
That is what it does in Angular. Vojta's cooked this up so that we can actually see which controllers map to which parts of the UI.
Yeah, so there is one root controller, which is called app. And that's basically responsible for stuff like, it keeps some state, like, is the this settings, is it open or is it closed? Is this search dialog open or is it closed, and stuff like that. So that's app controller. Then we have tabs controller, which is right over there at the top, and that is responsible for these buttons over there in the right top corner, as well as all the tabs. So creating new tab, closing tab, focusing tabs, basically keeping the state which tab is selected and stuff like that. Then we have status bar controller, which again is responsible for some stuff here. So for instance, you can manually change the file type and stuff like that. And last piece is settings controller at the bottom, and that's responsible for changing the settings. So
great.
I think that's pretty much the overview. These are the controllers that we use.
Okay, well, let's look at some of the code, and let's zoom into the tabs controller. And
All right.
Would you take us through a little bit of how that works? Maybe we'll start on the template.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. So this is index.html, which is basically a template of this whole app. There's just one template. And you can see this header right over there, which is controlled by tabs controller. And the first div, that's these buttons right over there. And then we have these tabs, which are done just by CSS, so it's just unordered list.
So and this is the template of one tab that will get expanded into multiple tabs.
Exactly. You can see there is just one item, and that's one tab. And this whole code basically creates one tab. And here's when Angular comes into play, because it says repeat this tab for every tab in tabs, right? So I think we might go to tabs controller, which is actually pretty lightweight, and most of the stuff is in tab service. So let me actually go to tab service, and I think we might show people like adding or something.
Yeah, let's look at add. I think add is the interesting part of tabs.
So here is the source code to actually add a tab, and I think that's most of. You can see the magic of two-way data binding here, because what we do, we just create a new instance of tab object, and then we basically just push it into an array. So tabs itself, if I search for this, tabs is just a JavaScript array, nothing special. So for me, in order to create a new tab, I just push a new tab into this array, and this two-way data binding automatically synchronizes it so that it, if I create a new tab,
because we have it bound to the UI, it knows that for every item in the array, I will create this tab template that you showed off.
So I think one of the things that I've really liked when I've played with Angular is that there's no really funky data setup or anything that I need to do. Mm-hmm. Those are just an array of strings, right?
That's right.
That I can just say,
just native array.
There you go. Great.
Which makes it really easy to work, for instance, with some third-party code. You don't have to wrap it with some custom stuff.
Yeah, and makes it easy at some point to serialize it out as well, because I don't have all this crazy stuff that's in there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. So do you want to maybe let's take a look at how we maybe maximize the window? Do you want to see that bit?
Yeah, sure. So that's in tabs controller as well.
And just describe what you're doing here.
Yeah, because the maximize window is part of the windowing API.
Yes.
Which means that we've got the ability to be able to completely change the window and size, minimize, maximize.
I can
Stuff
show
we can't do with normal web apps today.
That's right.
But we expect to be able to do with apps that are installed on our machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So this controller just calls something we call it service. And we have app window service. Let me actually show you this code. So this service is really lightweight. It's just tiny wrapper around this Chrome APIs. And I think that was one of the lessons that I learned. I mean, the reason for like doing this tiny wrapper, which is basically almost empty service, I mean, I think there are two advantages of that. First thing is, whenever this API changes, you have just one place, single place where to change it. And for instance, this API
using kind of raw
this
APIs.
API has changed at least like 4 times.
Yeah.
And then it's easy to change it because there's just one place, and you change this single place, and the rest of the app doesn't care.
Yep.
So that's first thing. And then second thing is testability, because most of those things like Windows close, you don't want to do that in unit test. You don't want to close the window during unit testing. So once you have this tiny wrapper, you can just easily inject different version during unit testing. For instance, some empty function or some Jasmine spy, so that you can assert whether it was called or not. But that's pretty much it. It doesn't do anything. So that's the reason for this sort of tiny wrappers, which is something that you can see multiple times in this source code.
Yeah. Now you guys sort of saw those change a lot. At this point, we kind of expect and hope that we're not going to see a lot more changes to the window API, because we are at a point where things are really starting to become more stable. The breaking changes really are fewer and much further between. You guys started on this months ago?
I mean, this editor was done a couple of weeks before Google I/O. We did that for Google I/O, so that was time when there were many changes.
This is true, and although this API will not be changing, I think this lesson still applies, because for me to be able to change my code, and if I want to reorganize my code, using Angular's dependency injection allows me to just have really good flexible code, no matter what I want to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, that was for me. That was really the point where I realized, like, oh, this dependency injection stuff, that's really amazing. Because, like, you design something one day and it works well, but then the other day it's completely broken because some API changed. So you fix it, and guess what? The other day it's broken again.
And it may not be an API. It may be other developers you're working with change their code.
I mean, it's the same if you're working on a product for a customer and the requirements keeps changing. That's completely the same.
Yeah.
And so suddenly the architecture that you originally designed is not that great as it was. And I really believe that the only way to manage and to keep the code nice and clean is just to keep refactoring.
Yeah.
And the point is that once you have this dependency injection that wires all these pieces together automatically, it is super easy to refactor. So you do it. I mean, if it's difficult, you don't do it. So that's
all right. Maybe let's move on to the settings controller.
Yep.
The settings is where we keep track of all your preferences and where we synchronize them across all your devices.
Before we jump there, I just want to make one quick comment to the folks who are watching. If you have questions for these guys as we're going, or as we're working through some of these examples and showing you this stuff, be sure to post your questions to the Google Developers Live page. You can go to developers.google.com/live and click on the live link and post your questions on the moderator queue just down below. Because we want to take your live questions as we go through this. So
I think that's what this is about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so settings.
So maybe, let's look at the settings controller. Is that what we have up? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, again, this controller is almost empty. I mean, I think that's another lesson that I learned during building this app, which is kind of like regarding to Angular, that I think it's good to keep the controllers really lightweight, because then it's way easier to move things around. So for instance, I remember moving this this search dialog, and at that time I had it like inside controller or the logic, and it was kind of difficult to move it to a different place on the page because everything that is inside the controller is kind of tied to the position of the app, because the controller has like specific position. So my lesson was put more stuff into services and just, so most of the controllers are just publishing stuff into scope so that it's accessible from templates.
Fantastic. So walk us through how this works, though, and into the service itself.
So settings, let's open the settings service as well.
And as you're opening that up, one of the other things I'll comment on, all of this code is available on GitHub today.
Yes.
So you can go to the GitHub URL, which we can in a minute put on screen, but you can go to GitHub, you can pull this code down, and you can play with this code yourself. You can go look in and see how everything works. You can try, seeing how all of these different services work. If you want to try and move something from one place to another and see what you were just talking about, you can do that. So all this code is available for you to go play with. We'll work on Chrome today.
That's right.
All right, so the settings service, that's kind of the source of the truth. That keeps all the states about your settings, and there's a bunch of other components that kind of communicates with this service. So first thing is the view. That's the part of at the bottom, like here. And the communication between the view and the settings service is done through Angular data binding. So again, whenever user changes anything, like whenever I change this select, it immediately changes the model. That's Angular business.
When we say model, these are just variables in your app, just properties.
Yeah, just objects, properties. Another thing that is in the game is the ACE editor itself, because as you can see, most of these settings are actually related to ACE editor, and ACE editor has like getters and setters. So there is a tiny wrapper around ACE editor which kind of translates changes to this settings model and calls proper settings, getters and setters on ACE editor. So for instance, if I change the theme, it will call ACE editor set theme to something, And the last piece is the storage, because as we mentioned at the beginning, all these settings are synchronized across all the devices. So at the Bootstrap, this settings loads all the data, all the settings from Chrome storage sync, and when you close the app, it saves the settings back to the storage.
Okay. Now, are you listening for events that may happen? So if I'm on two computers and I make a change on one, Chrome fires an event that says, "Hey, this event or this data has been updated." Are you guys listening for that today?
No, we don't. Okay. But you're welcome to send us pull requests.
All right. So that's one of the other cool things you can do, and we talked about this last week, that you can say, "Hey, I want to go listen for events," so that if somebody does, or if you go update it on one computer, you get that live update on the second computer.
You could do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
We did not, but you could.
And I guess, config settings for an editor, you're usually not editing on two computers.
Unlikely, but I think it would be a cool demo. It would be a great part of TextDrive.
Yeah.
And like you say, like this is on GitHub. We'd like to see everybody add to it. How cool is it that there's a text editor that anybody can play with? You can add your favorite feature to it.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
So I think we might actually show the dependency injection at least a little bit, display.
Yeah, we were talking about dependency injection. Maybe let's dive just a little deeper into it.
Because what dependency injection does, like even this is kind of simple app. I mean, the hard work is done by ACE editor. Let's be honest.
For sure.
And still we have I think about 12 services and 4 controllers. So that's kind of a lot of components playing together, right? And then you need to wire all these components together to actually get your app, right? And that's exactly what dependency injection does. So if we look into this concrete example, So let's look into settings controller. So when Angular sees settings controller, which is at the bottom of the page, it says like, oh, I need to instantiate this controller. So here is the constructor. And it first looks into the constructor arguments and it sees, I need settings service first. So it goes to instantiate settings first.
And it knows this by the name settings.
Yes.
And you're going to show us how we've told Angular that when you see settings, create this service for us.
Yeah. So the dependency injection or Angular goes to settings constructor and see, okay, but in order to instantiate settings service, I need to create storage first, and etc. etc. So this is the way how the dependency injection resolves all the dependencies during runtime. You don't have to worry about it. Every component just defines its dependencies, and that's it. And this makes it super easy to refactor code, because anything like adding new stuff, like adding new service, like maybe adding new feature, or even like extracting stuff from existing service into new service, refactoring. Yep. It's super easy.
And it makes your code very short too.
Yep.
Because like normally in your code, either you've got this kind of big main method where you're kind of wiring stuff together, where you create something and it needs something else, so you create that, or you ask for it, or you have to locate it. And here you just ask for these things, and they get automatically passed to your function.
I think it really makes you, it enables you to do refactoring, so you actually do it, because it's easy. So why not? All right.
Okay. So let's review some of the APIs that we used for this. Do you want to take us through some of that?
Well, so I think the most important API that we used was file system API. So basically, reading all the files and writing to files is done through chrome.filesystem. I think we can send links to docs afterwards.
Yeah, so we've got the links to the docs, but one of the things that's, I think, interesting about the Chrome file system APIs that's different from the HTML5 file system APIs is that it allows you to open files anywhere on your computer, right? So that I can go edit that document that's sitting in my documents folder or something else. I'm not limited to that specific set.
Exactly.
I can also save anywhere across my computer. So if I want to save it to the My Documents folder or
and there are still a lot of like security restrictions, so it should be like secure for the user at first, and then
it's not going to let me just go randomly open a file and not tell the user
so for instance, at this point TextDrive can't reopen previously opened files because there is no way to open file without actually bringing up the pop-up.
Okay.
So that user has explicitly say, yes, I'm fine if you open this file and you have writing permissions to the file as well. So file system is definitely the most important. Then we use the Chrome storage. We are using Chrome storage sync, so that it's synchronized in between devices. Again, the cool thing is that you have just this storage that you write to and read from, and it's synchronized across the devices. You don't worry about that.
Yeah.
And
there's one more. So you want to talk a little bit about content security policy, CSP?
Sure.
So Chrome apps, we want them to run, and users want to know that they're not going to do nefarious things to their machine. And so we need to comply with content security policy. And Angular will implement this for you. It'll set Angular into a CSP compliant mode. On Chrome, we can actually auto-detect this, and there's nothing for you to do. On other platforms, we've got a tag you can use.
Yeah, there's a directive that you put like onto body or an HTML tag. You put ng-CSP, and that would enable CSP. I mean, Angular itself is pretty fine with that. Like, there is just one thing that we do, like where we use, like we instantiate a new function, which is something that is not secure, so it's not, you're not allowed to do that. Sorry.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, and so that's actually a change recently in Angular, because it used to be that if I wanted Angular to go into its sort of CSP safe mode, I had to go and put that into my head or into my body off the bat every single time. But now I don't have to do that, so it makes my development a lot easier.
Well, we worked together on this.
Absolutely, yeah.
This was something we explored together, which was great.
This has been a really great learning project for all of us, because we've been able to really sort of go, oh, building a real app, here's a problem that we've run into in a concrete example. How do we fix this? We found one earlier today where we were talking about zooming. On Chrome, you can do Control-Shift+ and zoom in. But if you're running a Chrome app, Control-Shift+ doesn't zoom in on the Chrome app. So as we were starting to do these demos, we went, okay. Well, we're going to go file a bug on that. So after our office hours today, go have a peek. You'll probably see a bug in there filed by one of us to say, we need to be able to support zooming on our Chrome apps.
Yes.
Yes, for sure. All right, well, fantastic. I think, so we've got URLs for so AngularJS is just at angularjs.org.
Yep.
For the V2 APIs.
We have a URL for that. We can toss that up in a sec. But you can also get to that always by going to developer.chrome.com and clicking on the Chrome Apps link there. And you can get to all of the URL or all of the documentation for the special APIs. You can get to the documentation for just generally the hello world. And you can also get to all of the samples that we have. So beyond the TextDrive app that you guys have, we have an entire GitHub repo where we have probably about 24 different Chrome apps. If you had a look at our Google Plus developer page last week, we showed controlling an AR Parrot drone using a gamepad controller through a Chrome app. We filmed some more footage of it last night. I tried to get the video together and I didn't get it, but keep an eye on the Chrome developers page today or tomorrow, and we'll get that up. It's pretty cool to be able to control a helicopter through a Chrome app using a gamepad controller. Like, we're just going completely out of the box. We want to make it possible for developers to write applications that they just haven't been able to write on the web before.
Right, and then the last thing, of course, is the URL to GitHub for the TextDrive app itself. We'd love to see some crazy pull requests coming for that app.
That would be really cool.
Please use it, and please add to it.
Awesome.
I think we had a YouTube question.
Yeah. Well, so why don't we start jumping into the questions? We've had a whole bunch come in the meantime. So the first question is, updating or rewriting jQuery plugins using directives still feels a little bit foreign and could use some more real-world examples. It would be great to have a commented version of some real directives done correctly, such as the Angular Bootstrap. Do you guys have plans to do some more of those, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. So there are a couple projects that do this. One of them is called Angular UI. It's not something we do, but there's a part of the community of Angular is building it. And just go on GitHub and search for Angular-UI. You can see a bunch of great examples there.
Yeah, I mean, this question is like really related to Angular, but it pops up very often. And it really depends. Like, there are jQuery plugins that are actually easy to wrap, and there are jQuery plugins that are not that easy to wrap. It depends how. Yeah,
and I mean, to be fair, I think this is some place that we could improve Angular. We could make it easier to work with some of the really key components, and maybe we need to go talk to the jQuery guys.
Cool. So the next question is actually a really an interesting one, but from somebody in New Haven, Connecticut, wants to know. His comment was, "This makes me a little bit nervous because parts of this page seem to have gone dangerously close to inline JavaScript in the style of OnClick and Friends."
Yes.
Do you have thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, so you're seeing a bunch of attributes inside the tags now that we've added in Angular. And this feels like, okay, that's just like OnClick. Why is that not just OnClick? And maybe Wojciech, you've got some comments. But so one of the key differences is that OnClick is a global namespace entity, and it has all of the problems of testability and sort of leakage into the rest of your app.
Yeah. I mean, in general, you can say, I think
And
pretty much all the
Angular version
problems
does not have this problem.
Yeah, I
It's
think pretty much
scoped.
all the problems that this on-click handler suffers from, Angular does not.
Yeah. So it is. It's a good question, and I think we've got a presentation tonight at our meetup
Yep.
on Angular. If you can join us for that or see the video afterwards, we'll go into that in a lot more depth.
Yeah, it's going to be about directives.
That's right.
So where
Mishka's
can
gonna
they
explain
find the
that.
video afterwards?
So yeah, if you go to our blog, just at AngularJS.org, and you click on blog, or if you just go to blog.angularjs.org, you'll be able to find that.
All right, and so that'll be later tonight.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Or there is a YouTube channel, I think.
And there's a YouTube channel. That's right, just AngularJS.
Cool. So Dennis wants to know why TextDrive isn't on the Chrome Web Store yet. And I think there's a good answer, but I'll let you guys...
I think the first answer is that it doesn't run on stable Chrome.
Yes. Yes.
So
And as soon as it does, we'd love to put it up there.
yeah, for sure.
So the big thing right now is for web developers who are building Chrome apps. You can't upload them to the Chrome Web Store yet. We're still really working through and making sure that we get everything stable, we get everything right. We're not 100% positive that there will be no more breaking changes. We think we're there, but we're not positive yet. And so we don't want to allow developers to upload code only to find that, oh, we just made that one last breaking change that we had to do, and all of a sudden everybody's app stops working. So we'll make some pretty big announcements and do a hangout here when developers can start uploading those. Mm-hmm. And we'll work with you guys to make sure that yours is one of the first to get uploaded and available to folks.
Great.
So the next question is from Martin in Denmark, but he says, I love AngularJS, but he's not so fond of JavaScript in general. Will we see Angular in some form of Dart? And he's got a little smiley face afterwards.
That's a great idea. I don't see any reason not to. We've talked to the Dart team a bit, and we haven't started work on it, but yeah, sounds great to me.
Cool. Awesome. All right.
I mean, Angular is IDS. It's not tied. It's not coupled.
That's right. It's an
to a
idiom
language.
for developing,
Yeah,
and
so-
we're not tied to JavaScript, though we like JavaScript, but we like Dart too. So
Awesome. So we did mention that the code is available on GitHub. Dennis did have a comment, not so much a question, but GitHub is apparently not so happy right now. You will be able to go grab it. The URL that we provided will still work, so you can go to that URL for the code and pull it down later.
GitHub is awesome. I'm pretty sure it's going to be okay in a couple of hours.
Exactly. Hopefully it'll just be a couple more minutes. I'm sure they're working pretty hard right now. So this is a little bit of a in-depth question, so I'm going to try and read it as best I can and not mess it up too much. But so project and subdirectory, and they added a base source tag that says subdirectory. Thinking in the HTML5 URL will be subdirectory /root1 and subdirectory /root2.
Okay.
And for older browsers, it would be subdirectory #route1 #route2.
Yes.
But instead, it came out as subdirectory / !route1. Is that
I got lost.
all right? Well, let me show you the code. It's the one highlighted in blue there. And he's trying to figure out, is that probably a code bug for him, or is that a config
it's
thing?
probably a config thing, but if you would post to the AngularJS mailing list with a snippet of your code or a JS fiddled example, we'd love to look at it for you.
Perfect.
Yes.
And where can they go if they want it for the mailing lists?
So again, go to angularjs.org, and there's a menu called Discuss. Go to Discuss, and then the mailing list is there.
Excellent. So go post, for some of these things, it's a little hard for us to really be able to dig into these.
Could be a bug. We'd love that too.
I think it's more likely about configuration.
Yeah.
All right. So how do you determine if a jQuery plugin can be easily incorporated using directives or not? And this is from Vidge in New Jersey.
Yeah. So
I would say it depends how much stuff this jQuery plugin does with regards to DOM. I mean, as long as it can live inside like a div or something and there do whatever it wants, it's fine. But as long as it starts doing things like very often these modal windows and stuff, it does stuff like, oh, I'm gonna remove this DOM and I'm gonna put it somewhere else, and then I'm gonna delete this and I'm gonna create clone. And this is something that Angular compiler doesn't like, because once you change the structure, it's kind of
if they're very invasive into the entire page, it can be problematic.
Especially if you need Angular binding inside this component.
That's right. In the Angular-UI project, I know that there are some examples of those type of things, like the modal dialogues. So go take a look. And I know some of them use the Bootstrap code for that instead of jQuery UI, but I think you can get the same effect you want.
Yeah, but I think actually Twitter Bootstrap might be, in most of the cases, easier, because you can just take the CSS.
That's right.
And do the JavaScript part with Angular, which is actually way easier and faster.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the way to go.
We are big fans of Twitter Bootstrap for that reason.
It's awesome.
And it looks great.
It is very pretty. We're almost out of time. I want to encourage anybody to add any other questions they have to our moderator page. But one of the things that I wanted to say is, in the learning that you guys have been doing using building Angular and building Chrome apps, what's the biggest sort of learning thing that you guys have taken away in terms of building a Chrome app that you think our viewers would learn the most from?
Well, Vojta, you did all the work, so maybe you should answer.
Well, I think we mentioned pretty much all the stuff. So with regards to Angular, definitely keeping controllers light and putting more stuff into services. That's one thing I learned. I learned
anything about building an app versus a web app? Anything specific there?
I don't know. I ended up wrapping all the APIs into services very often, so that I have just really tiny wrapper around this service that I can mock up.
This was good, because sometimes there is a difference between running it as a web app and running it as an app on Chrome OS.
Point.
And this dependency injection will allow you to switch it in a very, very transparent way.
Yeah, I think we have good example of that, and that's actually the storage, because we said we are using Chrome storage sync, but if you run this this code on in regular Chrome, there is no Chrome storage, right? So that's we kind of fall back and we use local storage.
Okay.
And let me actually open this up. And what we do, I mean, the local storage is completely synchronous, but Chrome storage sync is completely asynchronous, and you don't want to have like service that is sometimes synchronous and sometimes asynchronous, right? That's kind of sucks, and it's difficult to work with that.
Yep.
So what I did is just wrapping this service and basically creating like wrapper so that even the local storage is asynchronous, and the rest of your app doesn't have to worry about that. It's just asynchronous all the time.
So you did sort of an impedance matching exercise.
Yeah, and
so that you can run as an app or on the web with the same code.
And again, with dependency injection, you can just you have these two like versions of this service, and you just inject whatever version you need depending on the platform.
Right. It's a lot cleaner than having a big switch statement or a whole bunch of ifs all over your code.
Yeah, better than having one storage with a lot of ifs, for sure. I think it's easier to read.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you guys. We're pretty much out of time at this point, and you guys have done, I think, a really great job of introducing our viewers to Angular and talking about some of the learnings that you've had building Chrome apps, as well as where they can go to learn more information about, taking TextDrive apart and using it themselves, understanding how it works, and some of the best practices for building Chrome apps. We're going to be back again next week, next Tuesday, same time. We're just figuring out what our plan for next week is right now. But today, most of the other guys who you're used to seeing aren't here because we're doing a hackathon. And we've got a whole bunch of people who are sitting down, building apps, doing some really cool stuff. So I think probably next week we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the cool stuff that everybody built, some of the lessons learned, and giving you some of the great lessons and showing off some really cool things. So with that, I want to say thank you to Brad and Vojta, and thank you for tuning in and watching, and we'll join you next week.
Thanks for having us. This was
Awesome.
Thanks
fun.
for having us.
Cool.
It's
Thanks,
cool.
everybody. Bye-bye.